My name is Elena and I'm 33 years old. 5 years ago, I was lying on a cold operating table in a hospital in Philly with my chest literally cracked open, fighting for one more breath. And while the surgeons were trying to stitch my heart back together, my own sister was telling their front office that I wasn't their problem anymore. That same afternoon, while I was unconscious and hooked up to a dozen machines, she posted a selfie. A brunch shot. We're talking mimosas, crisp white tablecloths, and expensive avocado toast. The caption? Living our best life. 47 people liked it within the hour. My mother dropped a heart emoji in the comments. My father? He claims he didn't even know I was in the hospital. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. Honestly, I still don't know which version of that story makes me want to scream more. 5 years later, after total silence, they showed up at my front door. All three of them, looking like they stepped out of a catalog, acting like the last half-decade never happened. And for the first time in my entire life, I was the one holding the cards. I was the one who got to decide. But what I said to them, it wasn't what anyone expected. Not even me. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm a total night owl and I always love reading those. My name is Elena, like I said. Now, let me take you back to a Tuesday evening in October 5 years ago. The night my heart stopped in more ways than one. I lived alone in a cramped studio apartment in Hartford. 3rd floor, no elevator. Kind of place where you can hear your neighbor's alarm clock through the wall and the hot water gives out by 7 a.m. I was 28 back then. I worked as a staff accountant at a small firm downtown. Pay was fine, enough to cover rent, groceries, the minimum on my student loans, and my monthly cardiac medication. It was never enough for savings, though. Never enough. Every Sunday evening I called my mother. It was my ritual, my way of begging for a scrap of connection. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, dial her number, and wait. She'd pick up. We'd talk for maybe 4 minutes before I'd hear it, my sister Sarah's voice in the background laughing about something. And my mother would say, "I'll call you back, honey." She never did. Not once. I still sent the birthday cards. I still texted my father on Father's Day. I still asked about Thanksgiving plans, even though the answer was always some version of, "We'll let you know," followed by total silence. I hadn't even updated my emergency contact form at the doctor's office. Still listed my parents' home number from when I was 19. I kept meaning to change it, but changing it would mean admitting there was no one else to put down. I wasn't ready to admit I was that alone. But then I'd open Instagram and there they were. My parents at the country club with Sarah and her husband. My parents at a fancy seafood restaurant clinking glasses. A family vacation to Cape Cod featuring 3 beach chairs, not 4. I was never in the photos. I was never invited. I remember something my father said at the dinner table when I was 16. He put his fork down, looked me in the eye, and said, "We've spent $140,000 on your heart so far. Your sister hasn't cost us a dime in medical bills." Think about that. I thought about it every single day. Sarah was 3 years older than me, and she had always been the sun in our family's solar system. She was beautiful, confident, the kind of person who could walk into a room and literally rearrange the gravity. My parents paid her full tuition at a private university in Boston. They bought her a condo when she graduated. They co-signed her first car, a white Audi, which she posted about a dozen times. Me? I took out federal loans. I went to a state school. I drove a used Civic with a cracked windshield for 2 years because I couldn't afford to fix it. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the pattern. Every time I shared something I was proud of, a raise, a finished project, a small win, Sarah would call our parents that same week with something bigger. Promotion, a new boyfriend, a trip to Barcelona. My news would vanish like a candle next to a floodlight. I texted my mother once after I passed my CPA exam. She replied 6 hours later, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Sarah got engaged?" 2 exclamation marks for Sarah, 1 line for me. There was only one person in the family who never forgot me, though. Uncle James, my father's younger brother. Every year on my birthday, he called. Same time, 7 p.m. He'd say, "Happy birthday, kid. You doing okay?" We'd talk for 10 minutes, and it was more than anyone else gave me. But then I hadn't heard from him in years. My father said James was dead to this family. I never asked why. I was too afraid of the answer. The last time James called, he said something strange. "Don't let them rewrite your story, kid." I didn't get it then. It happened at a grocery store on a Tuesday evening in October. I was reaching for a carton of eggs when the pain hit. A white-hot pressure behind my sternum, like someone had shoved a fist through my rib cage. My vision narrowed. The fluorescent lights blurred into one long streak. I heard the eggs hit the floor before I realized I'd dropped them. Then my knees went. A stranger called 911. I remember the tile against my cheek. I remember someone pressing a jacket under my head. I remember thinking very clearly, "Call my parents." The ambulance rushed me to Hartford Hospital. The ER doctor said words I only half understood: acute aortic dissection, emergency open heart surgery. They needed to operate immediately. Under emergency protocol, they didn't need a signature to save my life, but they needed a healthcare proxy in case things went sideways. A nurse leaned over me, her voice calm but urgent. "Is there anyone we should call?" I gave them my parents' number. It was the only one I had. They called. Sarah picked up. She was at my parents' house for dinner. I learned all of this later, every gut-wrenching detail. What she said was, "She's not our problem anymore. Please remove this number from her file." Then she hung up. I didn't know any of this when they wheeled me into surgery. I didn't know it during the 6 hours they spent fixing me. I didn't know it when the anesthesia wore off and I opened my eyes to a room full of machines and silence. No flowers on the windowsill. No one holding my hand. Just a nurse sitting beside me named Nora. She had a small photo tucked into her lanyard, an older man with silver hair. "We called your family," she said softly. "They said they couldn't come." Closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I just lay there and wondered. They couldn't come or they wouldn't. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The first 3 days I couldn't even sit up. The incision ran from my collarbone to the bottom of my sternum, 18 staples holding me together like a broken suitcase. I called my mother. Voicemail. I called my father. Voicemail. I texted Sarah, "I'm in the hospital." She saw it. No reply. On day 9, my boss emailed. The subject line was "Restructuring Update." Due to my extended leave, my position was being reevaluated. No guarantees. I was hemorrhaging money, about to lose my job, and not a single person from my family had checked in. That night, I opened Instagram. Sarah's latest post was a family dinner at an Italian restaurant. My father cutting into a steak, my mother laughing. Caption: Sunday dinner with my favorite people. A friend had commented, "Where's your sister?" Sarah's reply: "Oh, she's doing her own thing." You know how she is. Her own thing. I was learning to breathe without a machine while she was painting me as the flaky one. I took a cab home when I was discharged because there was no one else. My studio was on the 3rd floor. No elevator. I made it up those stairs in 4 stops, gripping the railing, my chest burning. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. A dirty coffee mug in the sink. A life no one had bothered to check on. Over the next week, the mail arrived like a series of verdicts. A hospital bill for $180,000. My insurance covered a lot, but I still owed $35,000. I didn't even have $5,000. Then the rent increase notice. I sat on my kitchen floor and called my father one last time. He answered. Elena. Dad, I had heart surgery. I almost died. There was a pause. Sarah mentioned something. Are you calling to ask for money? I'm calling because I almost died and nobody came. We all have our own problems, Elena. You're an adult. Click. I pressed my palms to the cold tile and finally cried. Not because of the pain, but because I finally stopped pretending they cared. Then the doorbell rang. It was Uncle James. He stood there in a corduroy jacket, looking just like my father but with warmer eyes. Elena, he said. It's been a long time. We sat at my table, surrounded by bills. He told me he knew everything because Nora, the nurse, was the daughter of an old friend. She had called him when she saw no one was coming for me. James didn't trash my dad, he just said, I know what it's like. Your dad did the same thing to me 15 years ago when I went bankrupt. He told the family I was a deadbeat and erased me. Pattern was the same. Fail, become expensive, and get erased. James didn't come empty-handed. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside was a silver key. This is for a house in Litchfield, he said. 3 bedrooms, a porch. It's yours. I put your name on the deed when you turned 25. I just never told you. I stared at it, my heart racing. What? There's more, he said. He showed me documents for an irrevocable trust. 3 properties, a savings account, total value over $1.2 million. I'm not dying tomorrow, he said, but I wanted you to know now. Because right now, you need to know that someone chose you. I moved into that house in December. For 4 years, I built a life that was mine. I got a new job, found a therapist who explained things like scapegoat dynamics, and I stopped reaching out to my family. The silence from their end was deafening. No birthday calls, no Christmas cards. Nothing. Then, one morning last March, Nora called me. Elena, your uncle is in the hospital. And your father just showed up asking about his estate. I drove there in 40 minutes. I found my father in the hallway, looking like a man who owned the building. He didn't ask how I was. He just said, What are you doing here? He's my uncle, Dad. He hasn't been my brother in 15 years, he snapped. Later, Nora told me he'd been asking about James' power of attorney. He wasn't there for his brother. He was there for the money. The next day, the whole team arrived, my mother, my father, and Sarah. Sarah looked different, thinner, her clothes stylish, but the brands were gone. She rushed me with a fake hug. Oh my God, Elena. We've been so worried. I stood like a statue. Inside the room, my father stood over a sleeping James and said, Someone needs to manage his affairs. Has he mentioned his finances to you? I just looked at him. Why do you ask? I'm his brother. I have a right to know. Tension boiled over in the hallway. My father raised his voice, making sure the nurses could hear. I won't let you take advantage of a sick man, Elena. Sarah chimed in. She's always been like this, playing the victim to get what she wants. I felt the eyes of strangers on me. It was the old trap. If I fought back, I looked crazy. If I stayed silent, I looked guilty. I looked at my mother, but she just stared at the floor. I turned and walked to the elevator without a word. The next day, I met with James' attorney, Helen Marsh. She was a sharp woman with wire-rimmed glasses. She told me my father had already called her twice trying to dig into the estate. The trust is irrevocable, Helen said firmly. They can't touch it. But Richard, Uncle James, asked me to hold on to something for you. He knew this day would come. She opened a file and started to explain what James had been preparing for years. He knew exactly what kind of people they were, and he had given me the ultimate defense. Elena, Helen said, looking me dead in the eye, your uncle didn't just leave you money. He left you proof. What I didn't know was that while I was thriving, my father's empire was crumbling into dust. My father had been financially nuked about 8 months before Uncle James ended up in the hospital. He'd gambled his entire retirement, every single cent, on some flashy commercial real estate deal on the shoreline. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room, but the project tanked. Permits were denied, partners bailed, and instead of cutting his losses, Gerald doubled down. He took out a second mortgage on the family home and tapped into a home equity line of credit just to stay afloat. It didn't work. He defaulted on everything. The bank had already filed the foreclosure paperwork. In Connecticut, that process can drag on for a year or two, but the writing was on the wall. It wasn't a question of if they were going to be homeless, it was a question of when. And Meredith? She was drowning too. Her divorce had turned into a total bloodbath, and her ex-husband walked away with almost all the cash. That fancy condo my parents bought her? It was actually tied to the family house as collateral. When the house went, her condo went too. They were all about to hit rock bottom, and they were looking for a soft place to land. Your father reached out to James 2 years ago, Helen, the lawyer told me. She leaned across her desk, her expression unreadable. He wanted to reconnect. But James knew exactly what he was after, a bailout. James said no, and suddenly your father stopped calling. Helen opened a drawer and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. On the front, in James's neat, old-school handwriting, it said to be opened when Gerald comes asking. He left this with me 2 years ago, Helen said. He told me you'd know when the time was right. I held that envelope in my hands. It was light, almost weightless, but it felt like it was humming with energy. I didn't open it. Not yet. I had a feeling this message needed a bigger audience than just a quiet office on a Tuesday. James got out of the hospital on a Friday. I drove him back to his main spot, a gorgeous, restored colonial on 12 acres of prime land. He walked up those porch steps like a man on a mission, waving off my help. I'm not dead yet, kid, he grunted, but I could see the fire back in his eyes. 2 weeks later, he called me with a plan. I want to host a get-together, he said. Nothing crazy. Just a few people to thank them for showing up when things got hairy. He invited the inner circle, me, Helen, Nora, his neighbor Jim, and even Aunt Carol from my mom's side, who was the only one in that branch of the family with a heart. Then he dropped the bomb. I'm inviting Gerald, Patricia, and Meredith. My stomach did a somersault. Why? Why would you bring them into your home after everything? Because, James said, his voice dropping an octave, I want them to see exactly what they missed out on. And I want them to hear the truth from me, not a lawyer, not a letter. From me in my house in front of everyone who actually matters. He told me to bring my folder. The one with the screenshots. The one with the proof. The day of the party was a Sunday in October. It was exactly 5 years to the day since my chest was cracked open on that operating table. I don't know if James planned that, but it felt like the universe was aligning for a reckoning. The house looked incredible. The maples on the property were flaming red and gold, and the smell of wood smoke and crisp autumn air was everywhere. Gerald showed up in his suit, but it hung off him like he'd shrunk. He'd lost that king-of-the-world posture. My mom, Patricia, walked a step behind him, clutching her purse like a shield. And Meredith? She showed up last, wearing oversized sunglasses like she was a celebrity dodging the paparazzi. I watched my dad as he walked through the rooms. He wasn't looking at the family photos or the memories. He was touching the door frames, checking the crown molding, eyeing the built-in shelves. He wasn't admiring the house. He was appraising the loot. After we ate, everyone gathered in the living room. The fireplace was crackling and the mood was deceptively cozy. That's when my dad made his move. He waited for a lull in the conversation, leaned forward in his chair, and let out this fake, we're all friends here laugh. Richard, he started, his voice dripping with false concern. I've been thinking. You've had a health scare. None of us are getting any younger. Have you given any real thought to estate planning? You know, family looking after family. James sat there, steady as a rock. I have, actually. That's exactly why I wanted everyone here today. I saw my dad's eyes light up. He thought he'd hit the jackpot. Meredith even leaned in, putting a hand over her heart. Uncle Richard, you know we'd take such good care of things. We're family. James let that word, family, hang in the air until it felt heavy. Then he looked at me. I gave him a small, sharp nod. He looked at Helen. Helen, if you would. Helen stood up and pulled a single document from her portfolio. Her voice was clinical, professional, and absolutely devastating. Mr. James Emerson established an irrevocable trust 4 years ago. It holds 3 properties and a significant cash reserve. The sole and total beneficiary is Elena Emerson. The room went dead silent. You could literally hear the fire pop. Then my dad snapped. He stood up so fast his chair nearly flipped. This is a joke. You can't do this. She's been manipulating you, Richard. She's been playing the victim, whispering in your ear while you were vulnerable. Sit down, Gerald, James said. He didn't yell, but the authority in his voice was absolute. I set this up long before Elena even knew I was back in her life. I did it because I watched you treat your own daughter like a line item on a balance sheet. I did it because you threw her away. Meredith's voice shrilled from the corner. Uncle Richard, Elena always makes people feel sorry for her. James turned on her. I know what you told that hospital, Sarah. She's not our problem anymore. Those were your words. I have the records. The blood drained from Sarah's face. She looked like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over her. She looked at our parents for help, but Patricia was staring at the rug and Gerald's jaw was locked tight. That's when Aunt Carol spoke up, her voice trembling. What hospital? Gerald, what is he talking about? And then the floodgates opened. Nora, the nurse, stood up and introduced herself. She told the room what it was like that night. She told them about the phone call, the rejection, and the fact that I woke up with 22 staples in my chest and not a single soul in the waiting room. I stood up then. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just pulled out my phone. 5 years ago today, I said, my voice steady. I had emergency surgery. While I was under, Meredith told the world I had distanced myself from the family. Here's the screenshot of her brunch photo posted while I was on the table. Here's her comment saying I was doing my own thing. And here, I said, looking at my father, is the phone record. I called you after I woke up. You asked if I wanted money and hung up in 47 seconds. I have the receipts, Dad. Gerald opened his mouth to lie, but the numbers were right there. He went silent. My mother started to sob, quiet, broken sounds into her hands. I didn't come here for revenge, I told them. I came here because for the first time in my life, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm not your burden. I never was. And from this second on, I'm not your safety net either. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Then Gerald did what he always does. He pivoted. He softened his shoulders, tried to make his eyes look watery, and went for the Hail Mary play. Elena, look, we've had a rough year. A nightmare. The bank is taking the house. We're going to be on the street. You have 3 properties now. Surely you can let your own parents stay in one? Just until we get back on our feet. Meredith recovered her ego just enough to pipe in. Yeah, Elena. This is your chance to show you're the bigger person. I looked at her. I counted to 5. The bigger person? You mean the person you told the hospital wasn't your problem? I was stressed, she snapped. I didn't mean. You posted a brunch selfie, Sarah. Living our best life. You weren't stressed. You were celebrating. I turned to my father. You needed me to be your daughter when I was in surgery. You chose not to be there. I needed you to be a father when I called. You chose not to be. Now you need something from me, and for the first time in 33 years, I get to choose. I pulled out the envelope Helen had given me. James's letter. I read it out loud. Dear Elena, if you're reading this, it means Gerald has run out of money and come looking for mine. You don't owe him anything. He made his choice in that hospital room. But remember this, cruelty is a choice and so is mercy. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. I just want you to be free. Aunt Carol was wiping her eyes. The neighbors were looking at my father with pure disgust. Even Gerald couldn't find a comeback for that. Then my mother spoke. Elena, I'm sorry. I knew. Meredith told me it wasn't serious, but I should have checked. I should have come. That was the kicker. She hadn't been lied to, she'd been given a convenient excuse to stay comfortable, and she took it. That hurt worse than the silence. I folded the letter back up. I'm not going to let you sleep on the street, I said. That would make me like you, and I'm not. Helen has a 6-month lease ready for the cottage on Maple Street. It's one of James's properties. Small, it's clean, and it's market-rate rent. If you can't pay now, the first 2 months are deferred. But you will pay. My father's head snapped up. You're charging your own parents' rent? You charged me for being alive, Dad. You counted every dollar you spent on my heart. $140,000. So yeah, market rate. I added one more condition. Sarah had to delete every lie she'd ever posted about me and post a real correction, or the lease was off the table. Then I walked out. The next week, the truth exploded. Aunt Carol told the whole extended family. Cousins, the uncles, everyone. The lies Sarah had spun for years, that I'd moved away, that I didn't want to be bothered, were shredded. People I hadn't heard from in years started calling me, apologizing, saying they had no idea. Sarah deleted her profile in a fit of rage. Gerald and Patricia signed the lease on day 6. They had no other choice. When they moved in, I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I just felt quiet, like a storm had finally passed. But then Nora called me. Elena, I need to tell you something. Your mother called the hospital a week after your surgery. It was 2 a.m. She asked if you were still alive, then she hung up crying. I sat with that for a long time. My mother had checked on me, but only in the dark, where it didn't cost her anything. That wasn't love, it was cowardice. A year has passed since that day. I'm 33 now, living in the Litchfield house. I have a garden, a cat named Buckley, and a job where people actually respect my work. The scar on my chest is a pale silver line now. I used to hide it under high collars, but now? I don't care. It's a map of what I survived. My parents are still in that cottage. Gerald nods to me when we pass in the grocery store, but he doesn't meet my eye. Patricia sends me cards now, real ones with real sentences. Meredith is still Meredith, but she's lost her audience. I didn't get revenge. I got clarity. And honestly, clarity is better. Revenge fades, but clarity is the ground you stand on. If you're out there and you're the expensive kid, the one who's been made to feel like a burden, listen to me. You don't owe them your suffering. You don't have to wait for them to change. You just have to decide that their version of the story isn't the one you're going to live by. I stopped waiting for them to love me, and that's when I finally started living. So, what do you think? Did I go too easy on them, or was the cottage a fair deal? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And hey, if you're still here, thanks for choosing to listen to my story. It means more than you know.